he has a great faith. Okay, we are ready to start our first presentation of the keynote speaker. We say a warm welcome to Mario Hibert, professor at the University of Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina. We are happy to have you here, and thank you very much for accepting to join our conference and to deliver 3 interesting lectures. So, welcome.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm really glad that I got this opportunity to come to Romania. So it's my first time here, and I'm really privileged that you had a faith in me and actually in Raul, who was the one that initiated my visit to Adventist University. I'm really somehow I was really touched with the devotional of this morning, which was actually somehow underlying it is a leitmotif of what I would try to deliver these 2 days. So I didn't put it in a way that I would be speaking exactly about unity versus uniformity, but while I was listening to Adrian, I realized that the basic concept that I'm trying to deliver for years now, it's actually when speaking about digital infrastructure, digital media, information media literacy, to somehow distinguish the difference between the unity and uniformity, because we are living today in a world which is dominated by the infrastructures of control and classification. And when I say control and classification, I definitely want to underline the library and information science as a discipline and profession which teaches us not only how to use information and how to distribute information, but how the information is actually organized to be distributed. So the history of our discipline, history of our profession is the one that framed the circumstances for automation of knowledge, information, and data that we are actually witnessing today. And the internet that was invented or introduced to us as a gift to connect, I would say today became a poison which controls and dominates our life by its design, which changed from the decentralized, de-hierarchized system to a monopoly of the unprecedented centralization of classification and control. So that would be my idea that I want to share with you and explain. I will have a chance to do it in a detail in these 3 presentations. And I would somehow like to stress out that domination by digital unity, which is actually explains our lives in a digital platforms that became operating systems of our lives, are actually not cherishing, but formally or superficially, or there is an illusion of preserving our differences, because we are all somehow not just connected, but attached and addicted to the same way of behaving all around the world. So that's why I will try to explain the different layers of invisible structures of domination and control, which are not at the forefront of the internet, but on the back end of the internet, which is for the most users not recognized or hard to understand, or because it is out of our touch, out of our sight, and but at the same time it not just influence but organizes our subjectivity in a way that we have never seen before. So that would be kind of intro to the to these presentations, and now I'm gonna sit and try to focus on structures of my today's let's say working title of the first presentation. That would be post-print assemblages, new extractivism and disenchantment, socio-ecological boundaries of media and information literacy. So this is somehow not.
Click on this. Oh, no, not on
board. You can use also
Okay.
this. And this. Yeah, bigger.
I decided last evening to start with T.S. Eliot's poem, The Rock, written in 1934. I guess you know, but I'll just say it for the sake of introduction, that T.S. Eliot was a poet and dramatist and literary critic, best known as a leader of the modernist movement. Poetry, he received the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1948 for his outstanding pioneer contribution to the present-day poetry. And why this poem is important and for this introduction? Because in his poem, T.S. Eliot explores themes of faith, humanity, and the spiritual struggles of modern life, questioning where life, wisdom, and true knowledge have been lost amid the accumulation of information. And that's exactly what I'm trying to frame for today's lecture, because this reflection of, from this poem aligns closely with the foundational ideas in information and library science, which are which could be presented in a form of the data, information, knowledge, wisdom pyramid, as we call it. So these are the opening stanza of the T.S. Eliot's choruses from The Rock. And I won't read the it in a whole, but just pay attention to those finishing lines. Where is the life we have lost in living? Where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? Where is the knowledge we have lost in information? So I have my own line added to this. Where is the data we have lost in metadata? As librarians, we know how metadata is the basic notion and basic concept of librarianship, because without the metadata, we won't be able to organize our information, organize our knowledge. So the metadata is even today, one of the most important, not just notions, but resources for the system of control and classification to be operational. So let's go back to the data, information, knowledge, wisdom pyramid, which this poem somehow conceptually frames and connects to the my idea how to introduce the fundamentals of information science for today's lecture. So if we look to this pyramid, we see that the foundation of the pyramid is, of course, based on data. But data, raw data, are just unprocessed facts. And we would say the data knows nothing. Without the structure of a data, we won't be able to have the information and get the idea or answer about the meaning of the data. So the information are the structured data in a context. The knowledge would be information that is applied and understood through the synthesis and analysis. And finally, the wisdom is the judicious use of knowledge to achieve good outcomes, and wisdom is something that we in a library and information science are not treating as something that as something manageable to be organized and distributed. So let's see now this slide. I intentionally did this for the sake of better understanding how I see and how I understand the digital times, let's say, that we are all witnessing as a formative framework of our lives. And I call it epistemic disruption. So if we turn this pyramid upside down, as I did it, we see that wisdom became the foundation, and the data is now on the top of the hierarchy. And if you don't mind, I would like to ask you, do you have any idea why it could be like this? Yeah, automation. So in the meantime, when I say in the meantime, from the end of the 19th century to the beginnings of the 21st century, we are witnessing the processes of how data, information, and knowledge has been organized in a way that at the top of this pyramid are the data because the data are the resource for the machines. We are witnessing unprecedented times in which big data are collected immensely and constantly, but not by humans, but machines. No human can accumulate, gather, process, synthesize, analyze, and distribute such a amount, such a big amount, unimaginable amount of data, and of course metadata, but machines. So we are living in a time of machines that are dominating our lives through the classification and control. And we are the sources, resources, the main resource. Without machines won't be able to function in such a dominant way that we are witnessing now. So that would be my first intro into this presentation, somehow to share with you the basic framework in which I operate when I explore and research the processes that we are living today. And it could be presented in this way. So, at the point of wisdom, we now have the interfaces. And for the last 2 years, it's the large language models as a basic primary point of contact with the layers that we call artificial intelligence, which is based on as I mentioned earlier, data and the metadata. So I see that what we are living today, the crisis that we are experiencing and witness today, is a consequence of the epistemic disruption that I just have presented by turning this pyramid upside down. And that is exactly why I want to remind you on the basics of our profession and our discipline, which is about indexing of documents that ended out with a indexing of the people, indexing of the users. In the end of the 19th century, as we all probably know, Paul Atlet and Henri Lafontaine had an idea and a project to gather the world academic scientific knowledge, to index it and make it available for the research. And we started to organize documents, books, by indexing them. So that's why I said earlier that day when we met that 19th century would be the century of knowledge, because we still had basic framework for organizing of the knowledge, human-to-human interaction. So the knowledge was transmitted by the interaction of humans that organized, indexed their documents, their content, that's how we would put it today, and invented the systems for the retrieval. So you're probably familiar with the concept of mundaneum of Paul Atlee. He had idea of the paper internet. It was impossible at that time, technically, to organize knowledge in a way that we are doing it today as a hypertext. But the conceptual idea of indexing and retrieving documents is the foundational idea called mundaneum, or the paper internet. So these are the roots of library and information science. We call it documentalist. In the 20th century, after the Second World War, we were introduced with the idea of computing, social computing. And that idea focused on organizing not just documents, physical documents, books, but information per se. So whatever media would contain the information would be able to be organized in a way which automatized the processes of human-computer interaction. So in the 20th century, we are introduced with a human-computer interaction as the focal point of developing the way how to transmit knowledge. And in the 21st century, the focal point of interaction are not even human-computer interaction, but machine-to-machine interaction. And machines are communicating in a system which we call now artificial intelligence. And they are primarily using the data and metadata. So what I wanted to stress out is that we, in a short period of time, experience very intense and fast processes from indexing of the documents to indexing of the people, from democratization of access to information to data extractivism. And we passed away from the tools of empowering to tools of oppression, from interactivity to interpassivity, from freedom of speech to fake news, increased polarization, rising authoritarianism, from open access to open divide, and from open services to data and AI monopolies. So I will be speaking actually about digital and its discontents. Digitization refers not only to the use of digital tools to target voters, disseminate messages, organize campaigns, etc. It refers more essentially to the submission of politics to the value of the digital. When we speak about the digital, we have to be aware that we are always speaking about the software, about the code. Or as Lev Manovich would put it, and he did it 25 years ago in his book, The Language of the New Media. He said, there is no such a thing as digital media, there is only software. So we have to understand digital media through the software, through the code. And that's why I said in the beginning, through the invisible, because software and code, that language is not visible to us, is not readable to us. So the software is the reality reordering device. which became the tool of domination, subjugation, and oppression. Finally, I want to talk about the platforms, which are embedded in everyday subjectivities and desires, and consolidate power under the guise of connectivity. Online environment as a minefield of political destruction, manipulation, isolation, and consumption, and generally about technology, especially owners of the contemporary technologies that appropriate not only the user's data, but also their minds, our minds, identity, emotions, spirit, and self-determination. And I will end up this presentation this afternoon speaking about the cloud colonialism and the new extractivism, drawing out the connections between resources, labor, and data extraction. So, I forgot to mention my disclaimer that I get from the Neil Postman writing, especially from his book, The End of Education, written in early 90s, which says that technology education is not a technical subject, it's a branch of humanities. And that brings me, and somehow I always go to deliver my presentation with this disclaimer, because I somehow feel that I always have to justify myself in front of the audiences, because I teach library and information science. So most of the people would say, how come? What is he saying? What is he talking about? That's not a library and information science. That's not how we used to think about library and information science. And I apologize for maybe this long introduction, but I somehow wanted to enable us for the discussion about how we also understand our professional identities as librarians if we are not to remember or understand the roots of our profession that became tools for today's oppression. So that's why I say there is nothing more political than organizing information. And I keep mentioning it to my students. Because library and information science are the discipline and profession full of prejudices, stereotypes. But it's actually the field of research that can explain us the layers, invisible layers, that are controlling our today's globalized lives. So, documentary practices and theories at the core of library and information science critically inform our understanding of how social computing platforms organize, represent, and govern knowledge and social subjects in a digital age. So the very important question in that sense would be, how did computational system develop from historical practices of communication, classification, and control? I call it CCC, and vice versa. And I already mentioned Paulo Tle, so I won't be wasting my time on this. Just another short presentation, this presentation title indication, which has post-print in its name. I borrow it from Catherine Hiles, which employs the term post-print to refer to the publishing after 2000, but also interconnections between humans and computational media called cognitive assemblages. So we are actually not speaking only about the centering of the knowledge, because at the same time, we should speak about the decentering of the human. That's how we are introduced in the last few decades, the concepts of transhumanism, posthumanism, which is not something invented out of nothing. It didn't came out of nowhere. It came out from the decentering of the knowledge first. So digital technologies do not provide just a new way of storing, organizing, analyzing, or presenting the human record, but are involved in the decentering of the human, and with it, the very idea of the human record. So emergence of post-human technologies, and I call it artificial intelligence, augmented reality, bioscience, robotics, social computing, etc., are actually somehow obfuscating that the concept of the centering of the knowledge is usually overshadowed by the major views of the digital, and major views of the digital are the social, political, cultural, economic, etc. So the current fragmentation and individualization of knowledge, that I call epistemic disruption, is a business model to maximize data extraction by exploiting user engagements. It doesn't matter if you are on social media or using chatbots or doing anything in the realm of the digital. So I would ask all of us, what kind of questions can we bring into the research in general, but especially in the library and information science research space, so that we are really connecting the ideas that come traditionally from the social sciences and humanistic disciplines into the world of machine learning and AI design? And especially, what does library has to do with it? As I already mentioned, there is nothing more political than organizing information. I'll just make a short reminder how actually I was developing my career in this way. I got my PhD in 2012. I was researching the concept of critical librarianship. So it's another mostly unknown or marginalized approach to the library science. But critical librarianship derives from the critical pedagogy. And maybe you are aware that critical pedagogy is critical theory and a critical practice introduced by famous Brazilian pedagogist called Paulo Freire, with his concept of conscientization. And he was trying to empower people, the underprivileged, those who are exploited, by explaining them, but listening to them in a way that they are becoming aware of their own questions that are fundamental for understanding the processes that keeps them underprivileged. So we have to start from our own shoes to understand why things are like this. We can't and he criticized the banking concept of knowledge, which is monologue. So I won't be now going into the critical pedagogy, but I just wanted to connected to the critical librarianship, which was fundamental for understanding of the practice of critical librarians, which fought for the freedom of expression. And there is no freedom of expression if you don't have access to information that you need. And we know that we organize collections for our users. And especially in terms of public libraries, all users should be connected to their needs, to their informational needs. And it's not often like that. So the female librarians in San Francisco in the late 60s and beginning of the 70s actually wanted to serve their patrons, their users, especially the users from the marginalized communities. And then they discover that their public library doesn't fit the needs of the users because they don't have the sources that those marginalized communities need. What did they do? They looked to their catalogs and realized that there is mostly mainstream publishers and their books that are in their library. And mainstream publishers mostly doesn't publish the content for the marginalized groups. But small publishers do. So the librarians did their job. They made a catalog of small publishers and pushed the public library to represent with the content all the communities. So basically, technically, that's how the idea of critical librarianship has been, let's say, invented. So that was just to get the small, a little bit details to this interest of mine to research the peripheral topic in library information science, which is actually fundamental to understand that freedom of expression is fundamentally related to access to information. And we somehow forget it now because we are living in the world where the access of information is kind of granted. And we are, of course, forgetting digital divide, and we forgetting that the internet is not the human right, and that there are communities who are not able to have the basic access to water, to electricity, to resources, etc. So I'm quoting now from the book of Melissa Morone, asking what does make librarianship so exciting. She says it's ontological question about its politics. So libraries are totally now adopted to the consumeristic hegemonic socio-economic model, and I quote Barbara Pfister, libraries are not, or at least should not be, the engines of sole productivity. Libraries should be revising their consumption patterns, their resource management, their waste production, and their practices and policies, as well as analyzing what markets and ideas they are supporting with their purchases, services, and activities. And it brings us to the even wider concept of information ethics. Information ethics has two foundational figures, Luciano Floridi and Rafael Capurro. And in a narrow sense, it's a digital ethics. It undertakes a critical reflection about ourselves, society, professions, methodologies, and human rights in a world shaped by the digital technology. And through the information ethics, I ended up, let's say, teaching not just media and information literacy, which is, of course, duty of librarians, but the critical media information literacy, exposing the dangers and opportunities that are arising from uses and abuses of digital technology. In my research, I found out that we are often lacking a comprehensive critical internet theory, and that's why I got so, let's say, I dig deeper and deeper into the layers of the role and position of technology in our lives, in our society. So that's how I ended up with understanding that we are living the platform capitalism because decentralized, the concept of internet ended up in the huge monopolies of big tech giants that are actually controlling and encompassing all our digital lives. And Rafael Capurro is putting it in this way, I quote, "Informational computational structures are instruments of surveillance and control, data extractivism and monetization that transform individuals and societies into puppets of state and corporative powers." So now I come to the media and information literacy. Why is that? I was from 2016 to 2021, after the COVID, engaged in a UNESCO project in media information literacy with my colleague from the Faculty of Political Sciences. And we were discussing and creating the, actually analyzing the background of, for development of media information literacy in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I introduced the concept of understanding the valuable position of school libraries in a public educational system as a perfect place and a resource for media information literacy to be taught. Why is that? Because the professional identity of school librarians is not just perfect, but it's seen and perceived as the identity of librarian that fosters and supports the processes of gaining a knowledge and being able to usefully navigate through the different kinds of information resources and media sources. So information and media literacy is often promoted or envisioned in a public educational systems as a separate subject. Let's have another subject in a school, in elementary school, in secondary schools, etc. And when we were developing these concepts, and we ended up after 5 years with the strategy of the information and media literacy that was adopted in the canton of Sarajevo. We have a cantonal local governments and laws with this concept. And we were struggling a lot with the professors, with the teachers, with the communities that they wanted to have a separate subject. And then I asked them, who's going to teach media information literacy? And most of the times they will say, they don't think about librarians as information specialists. Librarians, they are full of stereotypes. That they are going to teach somebody information middle, no way. And I ask them, then who? Who is teaching media literacy? Journalists. That's a communication studies. So I asked them finally, so you are actually telling me there is information technology and communication technology. Communication technology is taught at the journalism studies, and information technologies in library studies. But I have never heard something of information and communication technologies as separated, but we all call it ICT, information and communication technologies. So I wanted to push them to think that we have valuable resources as a school libraries that are open to everybody, not just students, not just pupils, but the teachers as well. Because library is a hub of service for those in information need. So media information literacy is, of course, enlisted in a dominant narrative of the digital progress and development. It's a buzzword. You will see it everywhere. NGOs are using media information literacy as their tools, educational systems. So when you really want to encompass what they are talking about, are there different literacies, information literacies, media literacies, you then end up with such a confusion that teachers were actually witnessing about it in at our seminars and workshops, that they don't know actually nothing about it. And it was exposed during the COVID-19. Because, as you probably know, we all went online, and then troubles became even worse. Why? Because teachers, most of the time, wanted to teach in a way that they used to do in their classrooms, in their physical spaces, which is absolutely no-go in an online environment. And so there were so many funny and stupid and crazy situations in online classrooms, and then they realized that we really need media information literacy. But media information literacy is mostly, predominantly taught as using the tools, cool tools, courses and trainings, and a lot of money is wasted for those cool tools or applications. How to use this application, how to use this system, how to use this software. But that's not media and information literacy. Or as Hibert and Sundin put it, is media and information literacy even possible in the late age of largely invisible algorithms and increasingly invisible information systems? So media information literacy, what is and is not about? It's not only about technology, it's not only about the content, it's not only about the media, it's not only about digital skills, but about the processes, attitudes, and approaches, ethics, and politics of information and knowledge management. So, of course, you see I have a lot of problems with the standard approaches to media information literacy, especially with its apolitical discourse present in the tech education. And that's why I mentioned earlier Neil Postman and the book The End of Education. And the last pages of that book, He's actually asking himself, how come that we as a US nation never had subject as a tech education? So the apolitical discourse in tech education actually somehow prevents us to see that digital medias were the primary tool for centralizing power, ending up in platform capitalism. So the digital, whenever you hear this attribute of prefix, we should be able to see that it's a monetizing system of control replacing existing social, political, and legal power structures. And I don't know, do you agree with me, but that's actually what we are experiencing lately in the world. Power shifts on social, political, and legal structures, and I would call it Trumpism. So understanding of today's ecosystem of data realities helps us observe the polycrisis, the climate change, authoritarianism, genocide, xenophobia, fascism. So how should we actually think about media information literacy? First, we should remember that it's not that we discover media ecology right now. It was Marshall McLuhan, the founding figure of media theory and famous theoretician from 60s and 70s and 80s, who's actually the one who coined the I don't know how familiar you are with that, the concept of media as a message, explaining that it's not message content that conveys the information, but the media itself. So from the different media, we differently perceive. It affects us differently by itself, not just by its content. So essential truth of media information literacy is that media is not a tool anymore, but the environment. So that's why I'm speaking about the structural changes in environment introduced by information and communication technologies. It changed our environments. So technology is not neutral. And that's the basic failure of our approach to the technologies in general, because we think it's a neutral. The ChatGPT is neutral. Technology always carry values and biases of those who create them. And we should never forget it. And to refer now to the Paulo Freire, who said, the education is always, always, always politics. So I here have more than a few lines from Hibert and Sundin's book, Paradoxes of Information and Media Literacy, exposing that MIL is much more than acquiring proficiency in the use of certain technologies. It's understanding that enabling awareness and critical questioning is more important than acquiring technical skills. MIL cannot be understood as standing outside infrastructural arrangements, but it is integrated into them. MIL should include an obligation to consider the workings of the information intermediaries and their automated intentions, including various algorithms and mechanisms for data extraction. And without including an understanding of contemporary information infrastructure, media and information literacy remains at the surface. So you probably understand already that all my endeavors and attempts for in 5 years working on the UNESCO project actually didn't yield results to make the proper shifts in educational system. Even UN representatives that we were collaborating together were actually much more ready to support those groups who are actually speaking about the tools, about the applications, about the superficial things. Yeah, definitely. And that was one of the many my disappointments with the representatives, with a full mouths of ideas that they're gonna support the structural changes in way how we educate our students, etc., etc. Why is that? Because we most of the time forget that the informed citizen, as ideal of democratic society, is now replaced or imagined as a rational consumer of information. And that's how the digital infrastructure is designed. To always come back for more. To consume the information. To consume the content. To produce the content. Now, today, everybody wants to be influencer. Not a student, but the influencer. To produce and distribute its voice to the communities. And that's why are we witnessing this epistemic crisis. Everybody speaks, nobody listens. So, media information literacy, I discovered, was a tool for actually engaging ourselves more with the digital content. And that's not what I wanted to teach. That's not how I perceive media information literacy. And let's say, thanks to God, I have opportunity to be in a classroom with my students and have autonomy, academic autonomy of my classroom, to speak about these things from the position of a teacher of library information science, understanding these processes in a way that it's not mainstream, let's say, agenda of how the digital literacy is usually taught. Because in media and information literacy, most of the time, the responsibility is placed to the individual, but the problem is structural. So no individual can resolve systemic structural problem how the digital infrastructure is designed. And it's the same thing, and that's what I was talking about last autumn in Sarajevo about sustainability. It's, for example, our individual guilt and responsibility to confront with such a systemic problem that no individual can't resolve. So the individual responsibility emerges as a key feature in the most understandings of media and information literacy, but what is never or rarely called into question is the underlying logic and specific commercial and ideological rationale of the respective digital platforms. So I call it that we are in need for the media information literacy understood as a grammar of technosocial condition. To be able to go even to the more complex questions as, for example, how to emancipate ourselves from the platform capitalism, data-centric view of the world and data-centric rationality. So now I come to the deeper hidden layers, let's say, of logic of techno-capitalism. Three major tendencies of techno-capitalism are expanding commodification to new realms of life, digital lives, creating new forms of alienation, and subordinating life to a private accumulation of capital. So mechanic subjectivity reimagines the human as a node with a broader techno-social networks where desire, labor, and perception are continuously reconfigured by capitalist and technological infrastructures. You're probably familiar with the concept of interregnum. And I borrow from the Antonio Gramsci, who said that the old world is dying, the new world is emerging, and he added, and it's time. Now it's time for monsters. So I see these changes in media ecosystems, especially digital media transformation, as an entropy that is reaching accelerated state of chaos. And we can also make a comparison to the pyramid that I showed at the beginning, because the concept of traditional and new digital media is actually the concept that illustrates this upside down processes, because the traditional media, we all know, had the human as a gatekeeper, as an editor. But now, the editor is not anymore human with the new media, with the digital content. It's an algorithm. Algorithms are filters and editors and gatekeepers of today's world of information. So algorithmic information infrastructure introduced also the concept of post-democracy. And we are living in a post-democracy, where is changed relation to vertical axiology of truth. In concept of traditional media, information was first filtered and then distributed. So it was hierarchical, one-to-many concept. Now we have a horizontal new media, digital media concept, where information is first disseminated, distributed, and then filtered. And that's how the algorithm works. An algorithm is another concept that I'm going to talk about, because it's invisible. You can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't smell it, but it constantly works. Even while our phones are out of my reach, for example. So algorithms are the invisible forces of new media ecosystem, which somehow solidifies what I would say is a Disneyfication of the world. So we see all around us pathologies of diseased society, collective retreat from reality. We lived in the era of post-truth. So the post-truth would be the era where the fact and fiction became indistinguishable. And Eric Weiglin, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly, German-American political scientist, defines stupidity as a loss of reality. A person cannot rightly orientate his action in the world in which he lives. I don't know, do you feel like that in these times, but most of the planet is actually somehow experiencing post-truth society. It is a society convulsed by disorder and chaos that celebrates the morally degenerate, those who are cunning, manipulative, deceitful, and violent. So I come to another famous figure of media theory after Marshall McLuhan, the Neil Postman. He has a book in which he explained, in the era of television, the processes of, and his famous title was Amusing Ourselves to Death. I was thinking the other day when I was preparing this presentation that it would be very alluring if I would write the book called Prompting Ourselves to Death, because we are in the age of prompting now. So amusing ourselves to death, and I don't have to mention if you are familiar with the Postman's idea, but for the sake of maybe of the audience, if they are in a virtual environment that I don't see here, Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman is a critique of how television and entertainment culture have transformed public discourse. The Postman writes about the culture that was clearly shifting from being shaped by the print communication to being shaped by television, and as a result, the collective discourse went from being governed by a coherent, orderly arrangement of facts and ideas to being ruled by the imperatives of show business. So it just became, after that, with the internet, with the digital media, even more profane, even more let's say, idiotic. So the core of Postman's argument is that every major new medium of communications transformed the culture by using it, by encouraging certain uses of the intellect, by favoring certain definitions of intelligence and wisdom, and by demanding a certain kind of content, finally by creating new forms of truth-telling. What would be the deep fakes today? But the new forms of truth-telling. Truth-telling, yeah. So Neil Postman argues that the society shifts from printed-based communication to television. Serious topics like politics, news, education became superficial and trivialized, turning important public conversation into entertainment. This shift undermines rational debate and thoughtful engagement, leading to society more focused on amusement than meaningful discussion. I already mentioned Manowitz, so I'll skip this. Now I'm reaching to the Luciano Floridi. As 10 years ago, he wrote On Life Manifesto, asking question, trying to get the answers for the question, what is the impact of information communication technologies on the human condition? So he comes out with these four ideas that ICT are not mere tools, but rather social forces that are increasingly affecting, first, our self-perception, so who we are, our identities, our mutual interactions, how we socialize, our conception of reality, our metaphysics, and our interactions with reality, our agency. And that's why I think it's maybe I'm redundant now with this, but I explored theories from the different disciplines. That's why I also like library and information science, which is by default interdisciplinary. Because you have to understand that every discipline actually treats in its own way the concept of information. But only information science understands interdisciplinarity of the concept. So when I'm borrowing from the theories, from the different fields, I somehow want to show you that in every discipline, doesn't matter, it's social science, pedagogy, economy, technology, culture, there are theoreticians who are actually talking, pointing on what I'm trying to explain today about structural changes in information environment. So one of my favorites is a Feldstadler, who wrote a book called Digital Condition, explaining the patterns shaping our daily lives, culture, and politics. And he says there are three aspects, three characteristics of those changes, and he calls them referentiality, communality, and algorithmicity. So referentiality is this a promise that with the digital tools, we all have voices, we have tools to distribute our referential system and to connect with others, to make the virtual communities, and as Adrian said, unities of differences. But what we forget is the third layer, algorithmicity. Algorithmicity would be the tool for the digital domination. And that's the uniformity. To come back to our today's devotional. We are uniformed in a way that we behave in exactly the same way whenever we touch our screens. We are instantly grabbed by the algorithms, by the algorithmic forces, and we never ask whose algorithms. Of course, algorithms of most rich persons in the world today. Owners of companies of big tech giants. I don't have to mention Musk, Bezos, Zuckerberg, their algorithms. So in the forefront, we are exposed to the idea, empowering, we were embracing the idea of having voices that will create a global village, that will understand better each other, learn from each other. But we see that those technologies, those infrastructures are polarizing us more and more, are actually pushing us into new and new conflicts. And that's actually the very dystopic scenario, not utopia, not any kind of digital utopia that was promised in the beginning. And that is why it's important to recognize asymmetry in exchange of information. We have a feeling that the whole digital world is open to us. But what we can grasp is actually crumbles of information in comparison to digital platforms and digital corporative capitalists that are actually having the big data of our interactions, of our behaviors, of our contacts. That's why I said metadata, of our metadata. When we connected, with whom we talk, what we post, what we like, etc., etc. You know how it goes. They own our digital traces. And that's how they own the patterns of our lives. Because we are so predictable in our behavior. And they are controlling and using and misusing that predictability from the digital traces of our behavior. So we still have the impression that we are choosing something, that we are deciding something. Because we can't feel and sense the presence of the algorithm that is actually working behind the curtain, exploring our cognitive biases, our interests, our formed opinions, ossifying the opinions that we have. So algorithms, speaking about algorithms as the new gatekeepers, is, as you already understand, story about the maximizing of profits over users' participation and attention and interaction. So I call it, we passed the way from user-generated content to user-generated revenue. So it is the financialization of everyday life in algorithmic factory. And there is also very interesting book by Tim Wu called The Attention Merchants, in which where he explains the ecology of attention, and the problem of algorithms is not that there are some wild satanic forces, but there are filters. But those filters are not transparent. And those filters are tools. And we are not in control of those agents. So that's why the problem with algorithms is unaccountability and concentration of power that goes along with it. So what do algorithms want? Google algorithms decide how we access the information. So Google defines what we think. Newsfeed, Facebook algorithms, or Instagram or TikTok, you name whatever you want, social media, shape ways of socialization. So they define who we are. Netflix and Amazon use their algorithms to collaboratively filter products. Amazon defines what we want. So Shoshana Zuboff calls this cognitive behavioral surplus. Algorithms are actually accessing that behavioral surplus from our digital presence, and that surplus is how those big tech giants and their empires got so big. So the digital citizen is just a product in the big data social spectacle. And we are witnessing the collapse of the social, which is the paradox between the promise of the social empowering and the depressing reality of today. So I quote Hibert Loving, Dutch scholar, the social manifests itself neither as a dissent nor a subcultural, but as a technocultural entity, a special effect of software which is rendered addictive by real-time feedback features. So none of us is able to influence or to change the social texture, algorithmicity of the digital condition. And so it's an illusion of empowerment by the digital environment, where everyone is allowed to have a voice or his or her opinion, but decisions are ultimately made by a selected few. Another interesting book from Katie O'Neill she calls algorithms weapons of math destruction, how big data increases inequality and threatens democracy. And so, and I'm few minutes till the finish of my first presentation, or if you want I can continue, but it's probably better to stop here now. And I'll just wanted to somehow talk about all these layers of problems before I go to even maybe darker details of these processes. Processes which, and I will conclude, and Evgeny Morozov, Belarusian scholar who made his career in the United States, writing about the technological solutionism. And what is technological solutionism? I'll make it simple for you. For every social problem, we will create you and give you application. And yeah, that would be enough for this first part, and we can continue in the afternoon. So thanks for your attention, and thanks for having me today here in Romania, in Cernica.
Thank you very much. You know, yesterday we visited the Cantacuzino Castle where a scary movie was filmed, but wasn't such scary as disinformation. You troubled us. Maybe we have to run somewhere without any internet and information because
unfortunately there is no such a place anymore. Almost.
there is no such a place anymore. Thank you very much. We could have some questions and discussion now, and after that we'll have a break, and at 12 o'clock we'll meet again to listen Dr. Raul Cervantes' presentation, not doctor, but he is right. So, we'll come back at 12 o'clock. If there are some questions and comments. Concerning the topic, yeah.
Okay, so I agree with this tendency of monopolizing let's say the digital, the media, in order and filter and to control, to use this as a form of control. And what would you see as solutions for us, let's say, first as human beings, and second as those interested in helping others think critically? In addition to education, you mentioned that, you know, go educate, have classes, workshops, and so on and so forth. When it comes to, I don't know, the media, because we use it. So would you suggest creating other platforms, integrating, or using more transparent apps, or what's your take on that? Thank you.
I would say that we somehow, Shiva Vaidyanathan, another scholar that I like to mention, was writing a book called Googleization of Everything maybe 15 years ago. And he, in that book, explained it, he introduced the concept of public failure. We somehow forgot the importance of public institutions, of public domain, of public good, of public resources, and the public control. Because public now can't control the corporations. But somehow we still could control in democratic process the government and the state. So Of course, it's not something that is absolute in terms of controlling those who govern us and represent us. But now, with the corporations that are actually behind these processes, we can't hold accountable in a way that we used the democratic instruments that we once had before being introduced to this post-democratic times, let's say. And that's what I see now, that and Vaidyanathan 15 years ago mentioned that and warned us, especially in terms of, for example, public libraries, that they missed their chance in the beginning of 90s, when the internet was actually in its most optimistic period times, to actually gain control over the public information. And now, 30 years later, it's almost out of control. So that would be my question, answer to your question.
Between different types of algorithms, and algorithms by themselves are neither good nor bad, and probably more good because they are prepared by humans to solve some problems, and one of the problems is to find information. So what you said about algorithms being bad is about these hidden algorithms that are used in Google or maybe Facebook or whatever big system there is. But the option for us, I believe, is to use our own library systems that allow us to search for information more openly, and probably being open to public, as you said, is probably the best that we can do. The other way is that it is important to know how algorithms work, and if they are based on metadata that we have in our libraries, and there is not enough metadata to answer the questions that people are asking, then probably we should understand that and not change the algorithms, but add more metadata to our databases. Okay, one of the questions that I had is generally is about when Adventist accreditation associations comes to an institutions, one of the questions that a library should answer is description of how the library helps students to distinguish truth from error and to engage in ethical use of information. That was quite a hard question for me because in our small library, they were working just as people who tried their best to add more metadata about the books we have for people to search more effectively. But we didn't know how library could actually help students to distinguish truth from the error. And another question that we need to answer generally is policies for acquiring new library materials with explanation of how these policies support ethos of institution. So I believe there could be some books that are held in our library, but they are against our worldview, but we probably should have them in order for people to, for students to get from the sources the worldview of bad people and understand that, well, not bad, but you mean not the right ones, but how to or maybe a book is generally good, but it has something bad in it in some chapter. So whether should we buy such a book or not? This is more about our institutional policies, how to do them. But according to your presentation, I believe that media literacy may somehow answer some of these questions.
Yeah, I mostly agree with you with your comment, and but the thing is, there is something called critical library instruction. We are not arbiters of truth. We are in a position to expose our users and patrons to different possibilities, different resources, different ways of searching for truth. So there is no such a thing as a question answer. You have a question, for example, at the reference desk, and then you come out with 10 possible answers, and the patron is going to choose for itself. So we are not those ones who are actually saying this is true, this is not true, this is a fake news, this is the fact-checked news. I think it's much better approach, and I had that situation a couple of years ago in my classroom. One student asked me, now you're saying this, now you're saying that. What's the truth? And I said, but I'm not here to tell you the truth. I'm not holding the truth in my hands, you know. It's up to you to search, to research, to study, but to be aware that there are at least two radically different opinions on the same thing, and layers in between. And what's the truth is your duty to search for. I'm not. I don't like the position that I'm holding monopoly on some truth. And maybe that's why I'm dissecting this topic in such a from such a different angles, not to make you share my point of view, but to think about from the different angles about the central topic of today's discussion, for example.
So if we are speaking about truth and fake news, then in order for a person to distinguish by themselves, there should be at least books that speaking this is the truth. The other point of view, probably not truth, a fake, and some special kind of resource that will show the difference between this and show that this is a fake. Fake information. But what if this third type that shows that this is fake is not publicly printed? It was prepared like article maybe somewhere, and we generally know that this is fake. We add this resource to our library, but people may feel that this is truth because they do not have anything to compare with. Is there a way, how do you think, to somehow show that this is a fake?
Of course, we as a librarians in library, we know how we collect our resources. They have to have the information about who published, bibliography. So we won't include in our collections any content that has not been filtered in a traditional way. So that's the basic thing in information literacy. But if we speak about media information literacy, that's what I was pointing. We just can't distinguish the truth and the lie, because everybody is in a position to produce the content and distribute it. And everybody, but not everybody, most of them are consciously doing it, but there are some of them who are consciously producing fake news, propaganda. So how would you inform yourself? It's a question for every digital citizen. So the question is, are you informing yourself from the resources with the credible resources, or you're informing yourselves on social media or at the internet where you can't be sure who produced the information? So, yeah.
But what if kind of propaganda is published in well-known by a well-known publisher, or maybe some part of the propaganda is put in just not the whole book, but some part of the book?
Yeah, that could, we call it art also. You have a artistic method that actually uses different ways of deceiving the reader for the sake of making them, I don't know, aware of things or deceiving them. It's really hard to be that strict, to use analytical mind in terms of these questions, especially because when we speak about digital media, we have to be aware that they are mostly, we speak about emotional literacy also. They affect us and they target us, and they are invented, let's say, to produce such consequences. So yeah, critical thinking would be good, but the critical awareness of the wholeness of the problem itself, I think it would be good to know before trying to distinguish that some group of people would be like in a position to prove that this is truth and this is not truth. Like, we are fact checkers and we know the best. We are librarians. We know the best. We have to constantly also be critical to ourselves. And that's maybe the basic thing that we should remember, that we first should auto-reflect and then reflect. Yeah.
I don't want to disturb this insightful discussion, but we have to have the break, and we can discuss without in the break.
Yeah.
And we can exchange information. The next presentation of Professor Mario Hibert will take place at 4 p.m. afternoon. At 4 p.m. we'll have here again. 15 minutes of break, and then the chair of ASDAL Europe branch, Raul Cervantes, will deliver us another astonishing lecture. Thank you very much.